I'm going to start with the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with his commands and commands us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Okay, want to welcome everybody here tonight, and tonight is going to be the this lesson here is chapter 6, and so chapter 6 is the end of what we would call the historical chapters of Daniel. Daniel is it's divided up into two sections, the historical and then the prophetic. And so the first half, basically, it's written in Aramaic, and the second half is written in Hebrew. So this will end up with the historical part of it, and then next week we'll begin the prophetic in the 7th chapter of Daniel, and then that part of it may go a little bit slower than what we've been doing, a chapter a week. So let's go ahead and start out with the reading here. So Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the whole kingdom, and with three administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. These satraps were accountable to them so that the king would not be troubled. Now, this Daniel was distinguishing himself among the supervisors and satraps because he had an extraordinary spirit in him. In fact, the king planned to appoint him over the entire kingdom. So, first of all, who's this guy Darius? Actually, he's not mentioned in secular history. It's only in the Bible do we talk about Darius, and so we really don't. We can't tie him to another Darius in history. But according to historical records, there was a man named and I'll mess this name up, that you can see it there, Gubaru, a Mede, who was appointed by King Cyrus to be ruler in Babylon at this time. Gubaru was born in 601 BC, which would make him 62 years old when he invaded Babylon, exactly the age found in Daniel 5:31. So as far as the name of it goes, his name, historians believe that the name Darius was not a proper name at all, but a title of honor, meaning holder of the scepter. In other words, the scepter holder, the king of the Medes. Now, the defeat of Babylon was I think I'd mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, was largely bloodless. I mean, it was you would think they would come in there in a big battle. Well, there wasn't a big battle. They snuck in under the river gates and were able to pretty much take the whole city of Babylon without firing a shot. But they did go in and kill Belshazzar. He was the reigning monarch at that point. And I've read one instance where the city did not even know that it had been captured until they woke up the next morning, and they've got all of these Persian soldiers walking the streets, and they looked and says, I guess we've been overtaken, and that was pretty much it. It was not a big bloody affair. Now, I would think that we could say that Darius was probably a very capable administrator, just looking at it by the way he appointed officials to run the affairs of Babylon. He must have heard about the unique abilities of Daniel and appointed him to be one of the three governors of the empire. You also remember that when Daniel had gone before Belshazzar, when he told him, Belshazzar said, look, if you can tell me what that writing on the wall means, I will make you the third ruler in the kingdom. And so Daniel told him, and then at that point, Belshazzar made the declaration, okay, Daniel is the third ruler in the kingdom. And so I don't really know how that worked, but when Darius came through, and he picked Daniel then to be one of the three governors in the entire empire. Below the governors were then these 120 satraps. Now that's a name that's not really used hardly anywhere else except here in Daniel, and I think there's one other place that the satraps are used in the Bible. But these guys were probably like provincial governors and other government officials, bureaucrats that they had assigned to various things. So Darius was impressed with Daniel and was actually thinking of making him the chief administrator, the chief ruler of Babylon. And however, we find that these other guys, the satraps and the other two governors, were very jealous of Daniel, and so that it raised its ugly head, and they devised a plan to try to ensnare him. And Daniel 6:5 says, at this time the supervisors and satraps tried to find ground for a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom, but they were unable to find fault or corruption, because he was trustworthy and no negligence or dishonesty could be found in him. Finally, these men said, we're not going to find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless we find something against him regarding the law of his God. So these supervisors and satraps went into the king as a group and said, King Darius, live forever. All the supervisors of the realm, the magistrates, satraps, ministers, and governors, have all agreed that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god for 30, god or man, for 30 days other than you, O king, will be cast into the lion's den. Now, O king, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it may not be altered according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. Thereupon King Darius issued the written decree. Now, the Bible, it doesn't record, particularly why these guys wanted to eliminate Daniel as a candidate to rule all of Babylon, but you could kind of figure it out. Maybe I don't know if they had age discrimination or not. Daniel was mid-80s at this point, because you remember that this occurred at the end of, right up at the end, like the 69th year of their 70-year exile. So, and he was about 15, 16, something like that, when he was taken into exile. So, I mean, here it is, you got almost 70 years plus his 15 years. So he's in his mid-80s at this point. But more likely, they were jealous of him or didn't like him. Number one, because he had greater abilities than they did. He just outshined them all. But he was also, maybe this was a manifestation of anti-Semitism even way back then. And Daniel he stood out because all the other government officials would have been polytheists. They, had many gods. And they did not, of course, worship the one true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that practice alone would have set Daniel apart from their pagan lifestyle, as it were. And so they searched around a way to depose Daniel, or otherwise discredit him so that he couldn't be promoted above them. But his lifestyle and his administration and so forth was absolutely without a reproach. Now, Daniel had been in government service now for almost 70 years, because remember, he was in training when he first went into exile. He was in training for 3 years, and then at that point they brought him into government service. And so here he is in government service, say, for say 65, 70 years, something like that, somewhere in between there. And they couldn't find anything in 65 years to bring up to the king that says, hey, this is a bad choice because he does this or does that, or there was nothing that they could do to make Daniel look bad in front of the king. Can you imagine if they were in today's world, how it would have been so much easier to find something. If we look at our current crop of politicians and their lifestyles and what they've been doing, there's no comparison at all. And I'll just leave it at that so that we don't get on a soapbox and get in trouble here. So. All of these bureaucrats, they came up with a plan, and they take it to Darius, and they hail him with the greeting that they always use for the kings or something. King Darius or whoever king, may you live forever. And Darius, he probably thought that they were also representing Daniel, one of his three governors, because he was, he's their chief. But they go in there and they said, everybody, all of the leaders here, we've decided that it would be a good thing if you were to issue this decree that no one could pray to any god or man except for you. Now, of course, this, remember, Darius is just coming into this position himself. He had been appointed by Cyrus, possibly, and so this is a good opportunity. I mean, this is playing to his own ego too. That here I am, the head of this whole Babylonian empire, and nobody can petition any god or man except for me for 30 days. 30 days, that's kind of reasonable. That's not a big deal, So anyway, they come up with this plan, and they ask, get it before Darius, and so he came up and he says, okay, well, yeah, maybe, I guess that is a good idea. He didn't really think it through, I guess. And so he signed it. Once he signs it, it's, it can't be retrieved or retracted. Remember we saw the same thing in the story of Esther, where Ahasuerus had signed this decree that Haman brought before him about the Jews. And so the Jews then, this deal that Ahasuerus had proclaimed, where if the Jews wouldn't bow down to him, then they wouldn't bow down to him, then they'd all be killed. And so anyway, the same thing, same kind of a deal here with King Darius. He signed this law, and it couldn't be withdrawn. And of course, these satraps knew that, so that they could just get him to sign it. Then he was obligated then to carry out the orders. Now, when Daniel learned of the decree, what did he do? He went back to, and there's the decree that if you didn't do it, and you had death by lion. And so anyway, when Daniel heard of the decree, he went home and he prayed. And it says that he opened up his upstairs window and he began to pray. This upstairs window faced Jerusalem. Now, the reason that it faced Jerusalem is that back quite a few years prior to that, when King Solomon had dedicated the temple, he said he prayed to God. He says that may when all of our people are all scattered out all over the place, and when they petition you or when they pray to you, said let them as they pray toward your temple here, may you hear them and grant their prayers. So that became then the custom that no matter where the Jews were all over the world, they would turn to the east, or the whatever direction it was. For us, it's the east, toward Jerusalem, and they would pray toward Jerusalem. So I guess if they were in Damascus, then they would have to go. They would pray southwest a little bit, and if you're in Singapore, definitely you're praying west to go toward Jerusalem. So that was his habit. He was praying 3 times a day, and his his prayer habits were well known enough that his enemies were able to set this trap for him, and they hoped that they could remove him from the scene. I think it's kind of interesting that if Daniel is in an upstairs room and he opens the window so that he can pray toward Jerusalem in the east, then he would, he must have been kind of loud or something. I don't know, because everybody knew that that's what he did. And it also just occurred to me that if he was in Babylon, he wouldn't be praying toward Jerusalem in the east. He would also be going back toward the west. So anyway, Daniel was praying toward Jerusalem, and he wasn't hiding anything. He prayed 3 times a day. That was his habit. He had gotten into this. It says in the Bible that he had done this from his youth, and he had prayed to the Lord 3 times a day. And that's also we recite the Shema 3 times a day. In the morning and midday, and then before going to bed. That's the minimum that a observant Jew would do, is the Shema 3 times a day. But there are other series of prayers that are done too if you're really following the Orthodox route. But anyway, this was Daniel's habit. He established good habits of worshiping God early on, and he carried these out. Then when he came to this situation of this decree that says that he can't do that, first thing he did was, it's whatever it is, and he went home and he prayed. And it says that he prayed with prayer and thanksgiving, that he gave thanks to the Lord for his blessings. So these guys, his enemies, they assembled outside his window, and they waited until he began to pray. And then so when Daniel knelt down before the Lord and he prayed as he always did, they knew that they had him. So then they went to the king, and they were probably very happy that their plan was actually working. And so they went to King Darius and reminded him of the decree that he had signed, and that it was irrevocable. And yes, that was right. The king agreed. And then they tell the king, hey, your guy Daniel there, your favorite boy, he's broken this law, because we saw him praying 3 times. He prays 3 times a day. So we saw him doing this in contravention of your law. And so verse 14 there in chapter 6, it showed that Darius was actually very angry with himself for being so gullible. He greatly respected Daniel, and he knew these men had done him a great injustice. They had tricked him. They fooled Darius, and they were going against Daniel unjustly. And so they instead of honoring Darius, these scheming officials had played Darius for a fool. And Daniel was a great administrator, and the king certainly would not have wanted to lose him. And so for the rest of the day, Darius labored to try and save Daniel, but to no avail. There were some things that I read that this saying here, that when he labored to try to save Daniel, I always thought it in my mind that he was sitting there maybe going through the law books trying to figure out a loophole where he could go in and get Daniel off the hook on this. But they said that no, that an execution could not be carried out while the king was still working, and it could be carried out then when he left the palace or quit working for the day. He closed up the office. Then they could go and execute somebody. So at any rate, he couldn't figure out any way of saving Daniel. And these guys that came up with this plot, they actually had enough. They were insistent enough that they actually went back to the king and says, "Hey, we need to remind you that this law was put into place, and according to our own laws, the Medes and the Persians, your law, not Babylonian, but your law, the Medes and the Persians, that you have to fulfill this, and you have to execute Daniel because he broke the law." So the king knew that, okay, well, he was bound by the law. He really didn't have any choice. So Darius ordered Daniel out into the lion's den. So here's a kind of a good picture. I think possibly if you were the floor looks a little bit too clean for being a place full of big old cats. So I'm sure they didn't have a cat box, a litter box someplace in the corner. It looks a little bit clean for me, but anyway, that's what the author or the artist came up with. And plus, I think the lion's den that I read that said that it was a cave where they had down in the ground, just a big pit, possibly maybe even an old cistern that wouldn't hold water any longer or something like that. And so they could put the lions in there. They could not escape. And these lions were kept around as an instrument of capital punishment. And murderers and thieves and lawbreakers were sentenced to death, and they were cast into the cave and devoured by the lions. And that way, it's kind of a horrible death anyway. And then that also kept the lions fed, and then they didn't have to worry about burials and all that stuff either. So the lions were probably not all that well fed, and when someone was thrown in there, they would all rush in there real quickly and dispatch the person quite just rip them limb from limb pretty quickly. But still, not something that I would want done to me. Darius then had this stone put over the entrance, and he sealed it with his signet ring. And then he had the other satraps that were there to also seal it with their ring, so that basically that no one could then get in, break the seal, pull the stone off and say kill Daniel, in the event that for some miraculous reason the lions would not eat him. So anyway, that's what they did. Now it is interesting that Daniel was he was regretfully cast into the pit by the king. He really didn't want to do it, but he was kind of forced into it by not paying attention to what his own rules and so forth, and what could have been. But at the same time, he probably wasn't thinking about that these guys were were trying to trick him into executing Daniel. Probably obviously it never even crossed his mind. So anyway, Darius is pretty reluctant, and he says, thy God whom thou servest continually will deliver thee. So your God will deliver you. And I think it's interesting there that he says that the God that you serve continually, no gaps in the service, that Daniel was consistent, that it was well established, Daniel's faith throughout the entire kingdom, and he had a whole 70 years of this history. So and I guess that's why that the plot against him was foolproof, because they knew that they could figure out some way that he would stay true to his faith and then break the law. So Daniel, he lived his life for everyone to see. Darius knew it. He recognized the great character of Daniel, and that's why he was very reluctant to throw him into the pit. But he also knew that Daniel is a very devout man, and perhaps his God will save him. And so maybe God would honor him, because even though knowing the consequences, Daniel went and prayed anyway. So Daniel, he was a guy just like you and me, and he was really no different, and he had not been given any. I don't think he had been given any abilities or spiritual ability to serve anyone, serve the Lord better than any of the rest of us. And what made the difference was his love of God and the personal commitment. I mean, he had a great personal commitment to God. And every one of us with that same commitment could do as Daniel did. And we see today in our world today, we've heard stories, seen stories of the people in the Middle East now, Iran, Iraq, Syria, and so forth, where ISIS would come in and tell the people that if you will recant your faith in Yeshua, in Jesus, then we won't kill you. And even down to the point of little children, 5, 6, 7, 10, it varied with the story and the circumstance. But even the children said, "No, I will not recant my faith in Jesus or Yeshua." And so, I mean, they would be killing children and parents and just anybody, but these people would not recant at all. And so we see that kind of commitment even today. And here Daniel was pretty much at the pinnacle of his career in terms of what he had achieved. Here he was, the number 3 man in the kingdom, and they were thinking about making him the number 1 man in the kingdom. And so all he had to do really was don't open your window, Daniel, and just pray a little bit further back in the room so that nobody could see you or hear you. God could still hear you, still see you. You just don't really need to do that. So anyway, Darius, he spent a miserable night, a sleepless night. He just couldn't, probably paced the floor all night long, wondering, hope against hope, what would have happened, or what could happen to Daniel. And so he's really angry about being duped himself. I'm sure he's a little bit of self-castigation there because he had been so foolish. But then finally, he didn't eat anything. He didn't have any entertainment at all, and he just a miserable, sleepless night. So anyway, he the next morning says he goes to the lion's den there before the sun comes up. It said at dawn, before the sun came up, when it was still dark. He was anxious. Darius, I think, was also a man of good character, and so he was so anxious over this thing that this great injustice had been done to Daniel, and you just got to wonder, it'd be like us saying, okay, well, we're going to put somebody in front of a firing squad with 100 rifles shooting at you, and you might survive. Who knows? So no one would survive the lion's den. It's just impossible. So anyway, he shows up before the sun ever comes up, and he hurried down to the lion's den. And like I said, when people are fed to the lion's den, nobody survives. But Darius, still, he gets there, and he said there was anguish in his voice. He asked Daniel, servant of the living God, whom you serve continually, was your God able to rescue you from the lions? And so Daniel, kind of, I don't know if he waited a minute or two or what, or if he had to wake up, but eventually he spoke back to the king, and he said, may the king live forever. And you can imagine at that point then the relief that flooded over Darius, because here his execution sentence of Daniel had no effect, and he was indeed still safe and even in the lion's den. So Daniel said, may the king live forever. My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they haven't harmed me, because I was found innocent before him, nor have I committed any crime against you, O king. So Daniel is telling him, he said, look, God sent an angel down here. You asked that God would protect, you said, maybe your God will protect you. And Carlos said, yeah, that's what the artist forgot, was to include the angel. I actually saw some other artist representations of the angel coming down and shutting the lions' mouths and so forth. But they also had a 25-year-old Daniel, so that didn't work very well either. So I guess I should have put one in there with the angel anyway. But Daniel said, "Look, I've been harmless, or I've been faultless before God," not meaning that he was sinless. He just said that he had not sinned against God, and he had not sinned against Darius. He had done nothing against Darius. So at this point, then Darius, ordered Daniel to be pulled out of the lion's den, and he was really happy to see him. And so then Darius then took these guys that had schemed against Daniel, and he threw them in along with their wives and their children. Now that seems to be wow, that's kind of harsh, because with Daniel, they just threw Daniel in the lion's den for breaking the law. But in this case, Darius had these guys and their wives and children. Now, it doesn't tell us how many people there actually were that were thrown in. If this was just a couple of the governors and a handful of the satraps, or if it was like all 120 of them, or how it was. But anyway, whoever it was that was in on the plot to depose Daniel, and that had falsely accused him, the king had them dispatched immediately. So, sometimes God says that, vengeance is mine, I will repay. So, we don't have to do that. God will take care of it in the end, no matter what. So this chapter actually ends with a stunning declaration by Darius, and in fact, said in Daniel 6:26 and 28, then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages dwelling in all the earth, may your peace be abundant. I issue a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, people are to tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He delivers and rescues. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. Now, Darius, he commanded everyone in the empire to tremble with fear before God, the God of Daniel. I think it's kind of interesting that when he said this against the fear and tremble before the God of Daniel, he didn't say anything about you're to fear and tremble before the God of Daniel and Darius. He didn't really include himself in that, nor did he tell the people of the kingdom that they had to forego all their other gods, that they would have no other God before them. So, I've read some people, some commentators have said, well, this is evidence that, King Darius, he was a convert now, and he was a believer in the one true God, and I think even one commentator had mentioned that, he had gotten saved, in the Christian vernacular. Only, obviously, Yeshua didn't show up for another 500 years. But anyway, they got kind of carried away with their idea of how far this had gone with Darius. But he didn't require anybody else anyone to give up their gods. He was just, in his mind, he was elevating the one true God above all of the other ones, so that you could keep your own gods, but then this is the main God here, because he had delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So we see then that the Bible goes on to say that Daniel was promoted, or he was honored by Darius, and at this point, I suppose he becomes the chief administrator of Babylon, or of Babylon there, under the Medes and the Persians. They never called Daniel a king, because he wasn't a king, but he was like maybe he would be like a prime minister or something like that be in charge of everything, but was not the actual king. So anyway, any comments? Let me go ahead and open this up right now to see if there's any comments or anything before I go to tonight's takeaway. Anybody got any comments? Anything to say on this? Like I said, this particular story, everyone knows it. It's when you think of Daniel, it's Daniel the lion's den. It's kind of like Noah, Noah and the ark, and Jonah the whale. They got one thing that they're known for, and it's Daniel and the lion's den. So I've tried maybe to bring out some things that you didn't know about Daniel. But anyway, any comments at this point before I go to tonight's takeaway? All right, well, let me go ahead to do the takeaway, and maybe that'll jog something. Okay, come on down here. All right, now, tonight's takeaway. This is, like I said, this was the end of 6 chapters of Daniel. The first 6 chapters are a history, basically a history book. But they do show a pattern. They show a pattern of what happens when God's people stand up. and they're firm in their convictions. That God honors them, He protects them, and that the testimony of God's work makes the ungodly see and tell of the greatness of God. And we saw that Daniel and his friends refused to eat the king's food, and they were rewarded. Daniel then correctly interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's first dream, the one with the big statue there. And there again, he was rewarded, and Nebuchadnezzar talked real graciously about Daniel and how God had given him so much wisdom and so forth. And then later on, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they wouldn't bow to the statue, and they were rescued in the fiery furnace. And then they came out and they were promoted again. Daniel told Nebuchadnezzar the truth about his second dream. That's the one where the tree in the middle of the field, and then the tree was cut down, and basically it was the prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar going to be a beast, like a beast in the pasture. So as the end result of that, it took 7 years or something like that of Nebuchadnezzar being like that, but it took a long time. But at the end of it, he was humbled and he gave God the glory. Now this in Daniel we saw last week where he's talking about talking with Belshazzar and telling him the prophecy or the interpretation of the writing on the wall, that Belshazzar was true to his word, and he promoted Daniel right there to be the third ruler of the kingdom. So again, when God's people will stand firm in their conviction, the results brings glory to God, not glory to ourselves particularly, but glory to God. And sometimes this standing firm comes with a cost, like I had previously mentioned, the people that are being killed by ISIS and their ilk over there in the Middle East. Now, they will not give up their Christianity or their faith in God, even though it means torture and death. Pastor, the guy that I can't think of his name right now, the pastor over in who was captured over in Iran, and they finally paid a ransom for him and got him out. He was severely beaten all the time for a couple of years, and tell him just recant your faith in God and we will stop the beatings, and he wouldn't do it, and he was eventually released. So when we hold Abedini, Pastor Abedini, and so when we hold fast in our convictions, even though it costs something, others will see the testimony, and they'll be impressed with it. I think that we have to remember sometimes. I had mentioned this when we're talking about the guys in the fiery furnace, that God saves us in a variety of ways, and He can save us from a trial. When we get into a situation, and you come to this place where, okay, I have been diagnosed with some kind of cancer, and so we go to the Lord and we pray, and sometimes He'll heal us from that cancer. I mean, it just goes away. We've seen stories of that where God heals people of horrible diseases or whatever their problem is. He heals them immediately. And so that's the thing that all of us would pray for, that when we come into a situation that we're healed immediately. And then, sometimes though, he saves us through the trial. The Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, they went into the fiery furnace, and they were saved even though they went through it, and they suffered no harm. And so they actually had to go through it. Same with like Noah. People use they talk about Noah being saved, but yeah, he was saved from drowning, but he still spent a year on a boat with no rudder and no propulsion, bouncing around with thousands of stinky animals for a year. So, he had to go through a trial there too. And there's many other instances where people were faced with a trial of one sort or another, and God sustained them even through the trial. So that, in fact, I think in many cases that's the majority of the time that, God will lead us through the trial. And, it says he will lead us through the waters. He didn't say lead us into the waters and let us drown. And then sometimes, though, that God saves us by the trial. And what I mean by that is that, I've prayed for people for healing, and they've been healed immediately in some cases. We've prayed for people who have died and were raised from the dead. I've seen that with my own eyes. And then at the same time, I've prayed for people that they were not healed in the way that we thought. They went ahead and they died, and then they were in the presence of the Lord. So sometimes the way that God heals or saves us is by the trial itself. And he says, okay, you've had enough of this, and we'll just bring you on home. So that to me, look, those are the three ways that God saves us, and that's what I see in these first 6 chapters of Daniel. That there is a pattern. If we stand firm in our convictions, God is faithful to bring us through, even though there may be a cost of it. And remember, God's ways are not our ways. And, we sometimes think, well, how come, that the bad guys always seem to win? I'm wondering about that now in some of the political things, that one person who's been corrupt and have been a crook all her life, has been dishonest and so forth. How has she survived all of that and risen to the place that she is? And, at this point, all I can say is I saw a deal that Max Lucado, however you say his name, said that his prediction for Tuesday is that God will still be sovereign. And that's kind of what we have to look at today, is that no matter what comes our way, if we stand firm, God is still going to be sovereign in our lives and in the lives around us. So we can take rest and assurance in that.